Let's start taking a look at progressivism. First, some of the concerns. Progressives are concerned about the effects of industrialization on society. They're concerned about the effects of industrialization and urbanization as well. And they really believe that people can change. People can improve. Somebody who commits a crime can be rehabilitated. Somebody who's poor can find a job. Somebody who is struggling can be educated and lifted up out of that. And progressives are willing to meddle in people's lives. They're willing to tell people what they should be doing. They're willing to get involved. Earlier reformers were less willing to go that far. They also believe, progressives, that reforms can be implemented best by government. It doesn't need to come from the Salvation Army or Goodwill or something like that. They can be implemented by local, state, or the federal government. And the key to changing people, in the opinion of progressives, the key to changing people is to change their environment. Okay? And unlike other reform movements, like, say, the populist movement, the progressive movement was a national movement. This is taking place all over the country. Part of that, sometimes we might consider it as just happening alongside it, but it's also part of it, is the rise of professions. And there's a new middle class emerging in America. And this middle class has achieved that rank through work in education, not through inheritance. These aren't people who have inherited their family fortune. These are people who, through their education and through what they do, are becoming a new part of the middle class. That would include professionals like lawyers and doctors. Ministers would be included in that. Businessmen and teachers and social workers, an emerging class or profession. People working in administrative jobs or people working in professional jobs are going to make up the professional class. And some of these, more and more of these, in fact, are going to be working in government. Progressives also believed in using experts. So the government's going to start hiring more experts in certain fields to provide the facts and to help support what they think should be done. For example, as the government becomes more willing to enact reforms regarding public health, more and more doctors are going to be hired by the federal government. Let's talk about doctors. Doctors are an example of professionals who formed organizations at this time. They're forming organizations that create standards for everybody in that profession to follow. And they might set educational requirements for people to meet so that you don't get doctors like this guy. In 1901, the American Medical Association was created, and by 1920, 2 out of every 3 doctors were a member of this organization. They create medical standards for doctors to follow. They say what kind of education a doctor needs to meet, and they approve certain medical schools around the country. And they say this is AMA approved. Lawyers around the country form bar associations. Up there in the upper right, that's the New York State Bar Association. That's all the lawyers in the state of New York. Teachers create the National Education Association to advocate for teachers at a national level. Businesses create, and business owners really, create the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and they're going to lobby Congress for things that business owners want. One example of the progressive professional is Alice Hamilton. She went to the University of Michigan Medical School, which was one of the few that allowed women, and she's going to work with Jane Addams, a famous progressive, at Hull House. She's going to go out and do field studies as well as lab research, and she's a real pioneer in terms of industrial disease. She's studying how working in these conditions can lead to poor health for workers. As a result of her work, in 1911, the state of Illinois passed laws to compensate workers for industrial diseases. Her research had proved there was a connection to working in these conditions, and as a result, the state of Illinois said that they needed to be compensated by their employers. By 1940, most states have the same laws. This is an example of what progressives wanted to do. Use their education and their skill, their expertise to better understand a problem like industrial disease, and then push for change like a law compensating people. And then when they got it, it improves the lives of workers in two ways. Either workers get sick and then they get compensated by their employer, or the employer realizes that they can't keep doing this for free, and so they improve the working conditions. Temperance is also part of the progressive movement. Remember, people have been trying to get Americans to drink less or stop drinking since the Second Great Awakening. And during the progressive movement, drunkenness is still seen as bad for all the reasons we talked about before, but it's also bad for business. It's hurting productivity. It's leading to absenteeism when people are hungover. It's also still not Christian. It's also still bad for the family. And progressives really like efficiency, and alcohol makes society inefficient. The Women's Christian Temperance Union is founded in the 1870s, and it is the largest organization of women in the nation. They are united, pushing for an end to alcohol. They're later joined by another group, the Anti-Saloon League, that wants to abolish alcohol and bars. In 1916, there are 19 dry states. So that means 4 years before Prohibition, 19 states had already passed laws banning alcohol within their state. That becomes a national law with the 18th Amendment. You can remember that because you used to be allowed to drink when you were 18. January of 1920, the 18th Amendment goes into effect, and Congress quickly passes the Volstead Act, which will provide some teeth behind the law of the 18th Amendment. Along with temperance is the movement against prostitution. And the view of progressives, like with a lot of problems, is that prostitution is caused by poverty, and prostitution is caused by ignorance. In other words, prostitution can be fixed. In 1910, progressives were able to successfully get Congress to pass the Mann Act, which made it illegal to take a woman across state lines for immoral purposes. Remember, that's how Congress can regulate this, because then, when you cross state lines, it becomes interstate trade. And by 1915, almost all states have laws banning brothels, which were like hotels where prostitutes could work.